Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Marianne, we're talking with Dr. John Trent and Dr. Dewey Wilson. And one of the areas they talk about is how much the pandemic has really taken us away from that face-to-face time. You know, we're even while we're doing these recordings ourselves, we're dealing with screens ourselves. And what do you miss most about the face-to-face? And what are you looking forward to when this finally gets back to where we're primarily face-to-face, even though I think screens will never go away?
I am extremely relational. I think you know this about me. I am someone who likes to look at your face and your eyeballs when I talk to you, because I just feel like personally, I care about your heart and your life. And it's hard for me to really know what's really going on in your heart if I can't be in your presence and see your eyes and your face. It's just different. Even when I drive, I want to look at your eyes.
Oh my goodness.
You can ask any of my students or my family members that when we're having a peel the onion, is what I like to call it, moment in my car, I just want to look at your face. And so I have really missed, and they bring out some incredible points in this podcast interview about, relational intelligence. And, interesting as we're diving into this, I just read an article about how millennials are not landing jobs because they don't know how to have eye contact.
Yeah.
And we can talk about it a little bit more on the other side of the interview, but I think they make some really great points and challenge us as parents and ministry leaders to help the coming generation look at each other when they speak. And there's value in that.
So Marianne, every listener out there is asking me to ask this one question. When I was growing up, we had a pastor's wife who would spend more time when she was driving her car looking at the person in her passenger seat and the people in her back seat than she did at her windshield. Yes. And it scared us all to death. So are the passengers in your car scared to death of you when you drive?
There's a mantra here in Texas about Marianne and her driving. And the mantra is, but did you die? And so that's where we roll. If that answers your question, but did you die? No, you didn't. And the Lord Jesus rolls on top of the, Pathfinder. And
yes.
I'm very, very intentional, and I don't look at the road a lot.
I'm going to have to pray harder for your husband, Chad, and your car insurance premiums. That's all I'm going to say.
So far, so good. It's all I got to say.
My goodness. Well, here's the thing. We are blessed to have Dr. John Trent and Dr. Dewey Wilson on the interview. And, if you're listening and you're a regular listener, you know that our interviews come primarily from our speakers from the D6 conference. And we are so blessed. We had such a high caliber group of speakers at this past D6 conference. And Dr. John Trent and Dr. Dewey Wilson just released a book. And even though we're playing it just a handful of weeks, it's only been out about 5 weeks. So this is still new for you, the listeners, even though David Jones was interviewing them at the conference, and it had dropped like 3 to 4 days before. Incredibly well written, incredibly insightful. And when we come back from this break, you're going to get a chance to as Marianne would say, peel back the onion of the principles of this book as we learn from Dr. Trent and Dr. Wilson.
Our team at D6 have put together top family ministry resources that will help you do family ministry well. We call it D6 Plus, an online monthly subscription for every age and stage of ministry. Adult, youth, and children's leaders can now enjoy ready-to-use family ministry resources and training from the team at D6 Family. What can you expect with D6 Plus? First, you get the D6 conference year-round, with a media library filled with main stage talks and breakout sessions from every year of the D6 conference. D6 Plus also provides teacher training videos and emails to help your team excel at family ministry. D6 Plus includes a toolbox of one-page talking sheets to guide families through pain points. D6 Plus also offers sermons and lesson outlines, countdown videos, and creative graphics. In addition to the resources and training provided online, D6 Plus members receive other perks, family ministry books sent directly to you throughout the year for free, plus special VIP benefits at the D6 conference. D6 Plus, family ministry resources and training to help you and the parents in your church have an excellent family ministry.
Listeners, we have a treat for you today because I am joined by Dr. John Trent and Dr. Dewey Wilson, and they just released their brand new book called The Relationally Intelligent Child. And when I say just released it, it released yesterday as of this recording. Not only that, but I checked Amazon, and there is only one copy left on Amazon. This book is flying off their shelves. Gentlemen, it is so great for you to be here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, David, not only that, this is the first. Now, D6 is groundbreaking, in terms of how do you pass down faith to your kids, but in terms of the podcast, you were early to the game in podcasting, and guess what? This is our first interview ever on this book. So, again, we really appreciate you having us on.
Well, I'm so glad you guys could be here because this book is, this is great. This is a book that is it's deep in its research. You guys are presenting the facts that you have gathered, and I love that because you're not just writing a book making assumptions about what's out there. Yeah. You've actually gone and done the studies and figured out some things. And so I want to talk about it, but I guess we need to kind of lay the groundwork first for what this is. And like I said, it just came out yesterday, which is so cool. Well, there's books out there about emotional intelligence and social intelligence, and those have kind of been popular. Goldman's really popularized a lot of those things. What is relational intelligence, though?
Well, Dewey, let me do this. Let me set you up by saying, first of all, you always want to write, I'm John Trent, and I get to write books occasionally, but you always want to write a book with somebody that's way smarter than you, So Dr. Dewey Wilson, who's with me, his doctorate is in cognitive learning, and what we had talked about doing a book to help parents really understand how to connect well with their kids, right? But all of a sudden, I get this phone call, and Dewey has just finished up his doctoral work on millennials and narcissism. Yeah, in other words, haven't you heard that a million times, the most selfish generation and the Gen Z? Well, what he discovered in all of his research really blew that up. But then it led to this book. So do we explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was doing my dissertation, I thought, this is going to be a slam dunk because there's enough research out there that all I have to do is go find it and put it together and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that my hypothesis was going to be proven, that millennials are narcissists, because that's what we hear day in and day out. But having done the research and getting further into it and grabbing a sample of people that would fit the age group of millennials, what I determined is that they're not narcissists at all. What they are is they're highly entitled just simply because they have fractured relationships, and most of those fractured relationships are happening at home. And so because we act, we do what we're trained to do, then we carry it out into the world. And so there's just a lot of these millennials that are ill-equipped. And they have the natural ability, they have the God-given ability to actually relate well because God created us for relationships.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I guess to answer your question that you asked, what is relational intelligence? It's really exercising our natural ability to learn, to understand, and apply relational intelligence within relationships.
Yeah, and Dave, I'll be real honest. I think IQ's overrated. Now you're sitting, across from 2 earned PhDs, and so right there they're going to want to take away our degrees. But it's not that your kid shouldn't do well in school. That's right. Okay. But I'm telling you, if you had a choice, and we don't, we can have both. So our kids can do well in school. We certainly are saying that. So nobody send me emails, okay? But on the other hand, well, let me just ask you: did you come from a home where relationships were really valued? And it kind of taught you as a result how to do relationships, or did you kind of have to pick it up on the way as you were going along in life?
It was a little bit of both, but success was defined by high IQ, college admission, good ACT score, yes, straight A's, Yeah,
and whereas you might have been great at relationships, and that's really what carries you. And what you're doing today is you do a great job of connecting with your guests, and you have to be smart, but being relational and just, God created us for connection, and there's so many isolated, lonely people. So that's what we get to talk about, with you today is we broke it down into, really kind of 5, wells, if you will, things that parents can just grab a hold of. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to stay there for a second because, I grew up with, 4.0 GPA. That's what you have to strive for. But I'll admit, I was very socially awkward growing up. I still am, I think. Yeah. But I was very socially awkward in middle school and high school, even going into college. But what society told me is, high IQ is important. How well you do on your tests. And so it was all about performance, so to speak.
Right.
How does relational intelligence define success?
Yeah.
Well, it's not it's not a capacity learning. I mean, like intellectual intelligence is. It is because that's a bowl that you can evaluate or determine what somebody's intellectual intelligence is. Relational intelligence is that relationships that are handed down from parents to children, and it's the understanding how to be empathetic. It is recognizing through just interacting and tone of voice and facial expressions, and it's all about really living life based on a secure attachment that you've been able to make with a parent or a caregiver.
Yeah. So just keep in mind, I think you're right. Remember, he mentioned capacity learning. Mm-hmm. So I have a twin brother. Okay, he's obviously really handsome. No, but we're identical. So we did all that. We switched classes. We switched jerseys when I got in foul trouble. We did all of those kinds of things. We weren't Christians until back then, by the way. But after we came to know Christ, but our capacity for the IQ side of things was totally different. So Jeff's an MD, PhD, but he relates well to microscopes. But I related more to people. And what I'm getting at is that for a lot of our kids, what matters? I must have had 1,000 times teachers say to me, David, why can't you be like Jeff? But I think what we need to realize with our kids is God has given them capacities. So, I don't have the same capacity as my twin brother on math and science, okay? But on words, I did okay. And so my point is, there's a sense for our kids where we really need to help them understand, how is God wired and equipped them? But then also it is incredibly important that they learn to build relationships, because we're just coming out of a whole year of forget your friends. And by the way, mirror neurons and all the things we talk about in the book. So we get into brain science, and that's because Dewey's so smart and all the cognitive part. But I'm telling you, it's not the same. When we're saying relational intelligence, we're talking about how do you do face-to-face relationships. So kind of like you get to college, good job, you've done a 4.0. Well, how do you relate to the people in your dorm? How do you find a life partner? How do you, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned like this past year with the pandemic and what's going on. it moved our face-to-face relationships to screens. Have you seen that hamper relational growth?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And well, once again, because God created us for that face-to-face interaction, and there's just the components of that. I mean, we can create a mask in just about anything that we can do, and online relationships is no different. I mean, having a Zoom conference with somebody is not going to bring in every element that's important to benefit through face-to-face relationships. Yeah. And so, therefore, and on top of all that, David, I mean, that's compounding. I mean, we think that we look at our children and we think that they're learning relational skills and able to do that digitally. But the problem in reality is that once again, because you said you were so performance driven, is that what it's doing, it's creating a stress and conflict in them because they're missing out once again on those strong components that we need to be able to interact with each other relationally. So it's almost like they're grading themselves, that if they're and that isolation just gets compounded, that stress and depression gets more compounded.
Now, there might be some out there that are tempted to say, well, this is just another passing fad in psychology that's soon going to disappear. But like I mentioned at the beginning, you guys have done your research into this. I mean, you have really invested your time in this, and so it is not just a passing fad. Can you unpack some of the things you talked about in the book as far as the connection between being relational and things like life expectancy and happiness?
Yeah. Well, let me jump in there because just to put it to shoe leather, I would imagine that a great majority of the people listening have experienced high capacity, relationally intelligent people when they've walked into an Apple store. Now, I know you may be a PC guy, which is great because you're smart, but I have to, I'm a Mac guy. But when you walk into an Apple store, I have a friend that is about my age, which is old, and he walks in one day and had his first computer, and goes, how do I work? And the guy helps him, and it was so helpful. And the guy goes, you don't hire people like me. He had just lost his job at a bookstore. His bookstore had gone out of business. And he goes, you don't hire people like me. And he goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. He goes, well, I don't know anything about computers. He goes, we don't care. It is relational capacity that we're really looking at. And so what I'm getting at is when you walk in and somebody attunes to you. So you take attachment theory, for example. So we start off by saying, what is it about kids that when they're safe and they're really secure, all of a sudden you've got that ability to then take the next step to go out and explore. And so what we began to look at was, oh my gosh, when you're relationally intelligent, then just the way God's wired us, then you've got this security, in your faith, with your family, that allows you to explore. But then when you're going to do that, you're going to make some mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. Yeah, and that's one of the things that we really emphasize that shows that when children are allowed to make decisions and to fall down and learn to get up on their own, or having somebody close to them that'll help them get up on their own, then what's going to happen is they're going to become resilient over time. And if there's something that I think we could all agree on that's missing so much with our children today is their resilience. We've had parents that have wanted to come in and fix things for them. And, it was I guess it was the old snowplow parents of the millennials. But with the Gen Zers, it was the helicopter parents, and with the Gen Zers, it's the snowplow parents. And so once again, it's helping our children become more resilient. And then when you combine a secure attachment and with the ability to explore their world with confidence, and the more resilient they become, then what they do is they learn to make wise decisions.
Yeah.
And hopefully those wise decisions will carry with them throughout adulthood.
Yeah.
Well, I know there's parents that are listening to this and going, yeah, we need this. We definitely need this in our home. We need to change our approach in what we're doing. What would be a good first step for parents who are hearing this and going, yeah, we got to get on board with this?
Yeah. Well, again, you always write books with super smart people, but one of the things that was created as a part of this book is a long time ago, I came up with this animal personality construct with lions and otters and golden retrievers and beavers. And it's gotten, a lot of people it's kind of gotten out there a lot, But the point is, what we did was picture this. One thing that's really important in the book, for example, we say, all right, here's these 5 elements of relational intelligence, okay? So how do you get an action plan in your home right now to begin to unpack these? So can I give you a quick example?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so one of them is that attachment piece, okay? So we've got all the research on attachment, but how do you do it? Well, in Proverbs, it says, bright eyes makes the heart glad. So here's what I want every parent listening to do, is when you get home today and you see your kid for the first time, let's say from school or whatever, even if they're younger, just brighten your eyes, okay? Purdue University did a study at the library, Purdue Library, where you would walk up and you'd hand them your library card, and then they would go, you know how somebody sees you haven't seen them in a long time, and they just open their eyes and go, so half the people, they'd hand them back the card and go, bright eyes, you know. The other half, they wouldn't make eye contact. Remember I mentioned something earlier about mirror neurons? The way God was wired us is that to really look into people's hearts and souls, and that's you can't do that on a screen. Mirror neurons don't trigger when it's not face-to-face contact. So what we get people to do is say, okay, so there's so many small things that they can do that they're already doing if they just were aware of it. So that's what I think is going to be really helpful about this book, is it's not saying go learn French or, Russian, a language that's going to, this is wired into us when we just understand, oh my gosh, I can do that. I can brighten my eyes. Bright eyes makes the heart glad. And it's amazing what that'll do in terms of attachment.
I want to end on this question. What would you say to the parents out there who they love what you're saying, but they feel like they failed at this point and it's too late to start?
Well, that's one of the exciting parts about what we're seeing in science, David, is that it's something called neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to actually to change itself over time. And the way that happens is that we introduce new concepts, new ideas, new application skills is what John is talking about. And then over time, if we stay committed to that and we just make these small changes over time, well, did you know that research shows that that habits actually reform? And one reason why is because these neural pathways are being reconstructed in these child's minds. And once again, that goes back to the definition. It's our natural God-given ability to relate well to others because God's already placed that eternity in our hearts.
Hey, real quick, how many people have had the thing where maybe they don't have a great relationship with their parent? Okay, then they have kids. And all of a sudden, their parent is doing stuff with the grandkids they never did with them. We hear this all the time. The capacity was there. But guess where they were parenting from? The way they had been parenting. And so they, but there's this natural, with a grandkid, there's this natural affinity for relationship because it's like, well, I don't have the responsibility. I just want the relationship. And what we're saying is man, don't miss a generation. I mean, right now you can learn how to do this, how to be relationally intelligent, and it can make a difference, from here on out in terms of where you're heading.
Yeah, and that doesn't say, David, that it's going to happen in the same amount of time as it would as if the child is small.
Right.
What we're saying is that over time, if you stay committed to it, and we understand there's challenges, but if you'll stay committed and work through those challenges, science has already proven that the brain is actually able to reshape itself.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, first of all, congratulations on the release of the new book. Just so great. By the time this airs, hopefully Amazon has got more copies in stock for our listeners and local bookstores. But also, thank you for sharing this. I feel like we could probably talk for 2 or 3 more hours and I'd still have questions. So maybe we can do this again sometime because
I'd love to.
This has been great. Thank you so much for sharing this. Thank you so much for the book you wrote and the research you've done. This is a game changer, and I think it's going to bless so many people. So thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, David.
Privilege.
We have a lot of interviews that I heard at the D6 conference dealing with the millennial tribe, if you would, and the grief that they get for all of the labels and the perceptions. But I've always felt, they are who we raised them to be, or who their parents raised them to be, regardless of whether or not it's a Gen Z set of parents or a boomer set of parents. And it's a reminder how much other items feed into the persona, and that whether or not they're relationally intelligent or emotionally intelligent or spiritually intelligent, we can put any adjective in front of that word, and realize that we've got to be aware of that college impression, that school impression, their peer impression, but especially what we can most influence, our home impression. What's the biggest place that you're worried about areas leaking into your kiddos?
I think the battle of devices, and our devices keep our attention distracted in a lot of ways. And I think for us, we went on vacation, we went on a spring break, several months ago, and we made it a spring break that was device free, and we spent time reading. And no, my kids didn't love it. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, oh yay, they loved the books and they grabbed the books and it was natural for them.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, we sat in an incredible cabin that looked out over an incredible view, and we challenged our boys to grab their books.
Yeah.
And when it was all said and done, they needed the solitude and the silence and the simplicity and the surrender of that moment. And we're thankful for our family coming together in that way. I think those are the things that I'm fighting for my kids' hearts, is just making sure we're making space for them to hear.
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, that we're inviting them to know how to operate at a dinner table, at a restaurant, when there's people. So we're in ministry, and there are people in our life constantly. And I don't want their faces and countenances to be so consumed with their device that they don't know how to have a conversation. Like, this is important.
That's right. That's right. And by the way, I think that's a good promo. We've got on July the 6th, an episode that we are planning with an incredible speaker we had named Arlene Pelicane. And what Marianne is describing about device free. And there are times when our kiddos were growing up, they didn't understand why all their friends had TVs in their bedrooms, and we did not allow that. And, again, cell phones were relatively new. We did get our kiddos cell phones early on. And, I wish we could go back and do some things differently. But I think here's the part that I really appreciated. I did not write down this term, but Dr. Wilson said this in the interview. When we make mistakes with our kids, I think he said it was neuroplasticity.
Yes.
On this one. And he said, when we've made mistakes, even as parents, or tough things have happened in our kiddos' lives, God has this incredible redeeming ability to pull it around intact. I think most of our listeners know that about 6 years ago, my wife had a stroke, and it was a pretty severe one. And she could not put words together. One of her legs would not work. She had to go through 3 weeks of inside therapy, and working on walking again and talking again. And God has so uniquely designed the human body to reconnect those little neurons and those nerves and those abilities have workarounds. And if he can do that to our physical bodies, he can also do that in our redemptive spirit when we've had sin impact our life or we've had failures. We can do those workarounds and we can heal from it while we never forget it. We can grow from it and become stronger as a result. I was so appreciative for that word from Dr. Wilson.
Yes, I was really challenged. I starred the point that we've got to be aware of the God-given capacity for our kids. That's such great perspective. And to be honest with you, that recenters and recalibrates my heart on God and, his plan and purposes for my kids' life. And, he sees the big picture. I call that the Bob Ross approach because Bob Ross, you start the 30 minutes with Bob Ross and you don't know what in the world he's doing with brown and green paint. But by the end of the 30 minutes, the canvas, the picture that is being painted is remarkable and fantastic. And that's really the picture of our children's lives and our lives, is God knows the full canvas and what he's doing with our story. Yeah.
Yeah, and all we want to do is keep telling our kids where to paint the colors at, and hey, here's the numbers. Let me paint by the numbers on that.
That's right.
Such a good illustration there. Well, it's amazing that we do not mess up our kids more than we mess them up, and God is so gracious in that.
Yes.
Let them fall down. Let them learn. My wife and I, we were so pleased in looking at that big picture, the Bob Ross approach of what we wanted from adult kids. We started to make sure that they had full responsibility over small things when they were 7, 8, and 9, so that they could make mistakes with the little things. And, I think if my wife and I were saying this to parents coming along, is start letting them fall and make mistakes when they're young, and then the mistakes won't break them.
Right.
So that when they get older, that's when when they're teenagers and they're out on their own, that's when parents tend to let them, but they haven't had practice prior to getting there. So parents, if you're listening and your kiddos are in elementary school, give them, charge over allowance money to do what they need to do. My favorite illustration of this is we gave travel money to them at the beginning of our trips. So like if we did a 4-day weekend, we'd hand each of our kids $20 and say, hey, here's your souvenir money. That way you don't have to come asking mom and dad, but there's a cap on it. This is all you get. And our daughter, on the first little stop at a truck stop filling up the car, she might spend half of it on what I call the trinket trash on the little spinner there at the checkout stand. And we let her. And then when we get to our destination, our son's buying the cool T-shirt for $12, and our daughter only has 8. And she's like, Dad, she's crying and she's got tears. And I look at her and say, you've already spent it. And I could say it very cold, and my wife's going, but she doesn't have. But we agreed. We were united. And it taught our kids how to spend money and save money as they got older. So parents, figure out that. What is it like, whether it's school shopping, allowance, the ability to read, or as Marianne talked earlier, the ability not to have technology around all the time. Give them charge over some things and help them understand the long-term picture.
That's right. I've just been so challenged by this, and I hope you are inspired as ministry leaders about how you set up your ministries. And, teenagers need to be in circles and not just rows all the time. I think circles create, if you're reopening as a church and you're starting to have connection carefully and wisely, I would encourage, circles, and help your students do face-to-face interactions. Kind of like I said earlier, I read an article that there are some millennials that are not landing jobs because they're not having eye contact. They need to know how to look me in the eye. They need to know how to look each other in the eye. That's part of it. That's emotional and relational intelligence. So I think we can practice some of these things in our ministries.
Yes. And politely pull that kid aside and challenge them. Say, hey, I want you to look me in the eye. I want you to shake my hand with a firm grip. I want you to, whatever it is, and just those small mentoring moments, find them. Right. Marianne, I hear you doing that so well with everybody that you're around, especially those young teenage girls. I just hear you pouring in and challenging them for life skills. Thanks for how you do that. Thank you. Well, as we begin to wrap up, we're looking forward to a time with Lanita Fix on our next week's podcast. And we cannot wait to sit down and talk with her and hear her insight. It's kind of a follow-up on Dr. Tim Elmore's. Both of them study the millennial and the Gen Z crowd, and both of them have dove deep into Gen Z. And so we're going to hear some research from Lanita and the practicality of it and how it affects. And we're going to carry these thoughts that Marianne has talked about. What are they struggling with a little bit further? And I'll tell you this, if you are not prepared for Gen Z, then you are not prepared for the emerging young adults coming into your congregation. And if you don't prepare for it, do not complain when you have an aging congregation. Until next week, we'll be praying that you look for wonderful connectional opportunities with your kiddos and the people who God has placed around you in ministry. Take care, everyone.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.